Welcome to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. And now, here's your host, Wade T. Lightheart.
What if you could double your energy naturally without caffeine or stimulants in just 3 short months? It's not only possible, you can transform every aspect of your health if you follow the 12-week blueprint we've created for you in the Awesome Health System. The Awesome Health System is a free course where you receive a daily video lesson spanning the most cutting-edge secrets for air, water, exercise, sunshine, optimizers, mindset, and education. It's something most companies would charge hundreds of dollars for, yet you get it for free when you go to bioptimizers.com. To access your course, register to download the PDF report called 3 Phases of Bioptimization, which gets you access to the report and daily access to the first lesson in the 12-week, 84-day Awesome Health course.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Wade T. Lightheart, wherever you are. We're here today to talk about some really important topics that can help you transform your health, your vitality, and maybe unlocking the next stage of your health journey. That's what the show is all about. And today we are delighted to have Joe Cohen joining us. And he's got a very interesting story. You know, he started out, he was a sick child, turned into a health marvel. He's coming to us from Tel Aviv. If you're watching on the video, you can see he's a picture of vitality and health. And he essentially had to figure out how to rewire his body and mind. And he did that by using genetics, biomarkers, and biohacking. Of course, science and personal experience, and of course, being into mega dosing of supplements. And I refer to that oftentimes, if you go back historically, the first people to kind of do that successfully in a scientific form was the orthomolecular scientists, Dr. Linus Pauling, Dr. David Hawkins, and Dr. Abram Hoffer back in the 70s. And then we've expanded on a lot of those concepts at Bioptimizers. He's also going to share how DNA insights can help you extend your health span and make precise health decisions, revolutionizing personalized wellness with Decode GPT. So now just a little background on Joe. He's a leading biohacker who overcame 60 plus chronic conditions. That's amazing, and also the testament of how you, no matter where you might be on your health journey, there's always hope if you want to continue to pursue it. He cracked the code on his DNA with bold self-experiments, and now uses his expertise to help thousands of people hack their health. Joe's relentless pursuit of optimal health led him to optimize, get this, 400 lab parameters and achieve one of the lowest rates of aging in the world. He takes 200 plus supplements a day and coaches top health influencers in his free time. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So we were talking a little bit before different parts of the world. You're currently in Tel Aviv, enjoying the historical and beauty of that country. I think it's a fascinating place. I know it's on my bucket list to go. I always try to pick a time where it's relatively more peaceful than others. I'm a little scaredy cat when it comes to like missiles flying or whatever, but I know we're kind of in a okay zone right now, but I appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Maybe you can share with us your story and how that unfolded. I mean, 60 plus chronic conditions. I mean, that seems, for most people, that sounds like a hopeless situation. Probably involved a lot of medical doctor stuff. Can you give us a little background on how did that all unfold for you?
Yeah, so I had a bunch of different health issues. Just kind of like nothing in my body was working. So inflammation all over the place, no stamina, no energy, brain function wasn't working well, fatigue, low motivation, sleep problems, acne, just kind of like every kind of health issue that you don't get when you're like, maybe with the exception of heart disease and cancer and, serious conditions that you get when you're much older, like Alzheimer's. My body just wasn't working in in like it was just I had the worst functioning body of anyone I knew. So that got me into the health journey, and I tried to go to some doctors and try to see some things, but like it was just so clear that nobody knew what's going on. Nobody's gonna really figure this stuff out except for me. So that's when I just got into researching the body and trying to figure out everything I could about how the body works, how supplements work. I think started with diet, lifestyle more. So I was doing intermittent fasting, cold plunges like 20 years ago already. So I started pretty early on with these kinds of things. But what I realized uh, that these things had a limit, right? The lifestyle stuff had a limit. I found that the supplements helped me way more than diet, lifestyle. Yeah, than diet and lifestyle.
When did that whole kind of switch from going to medical kind of authorities, not getting anywhere, and then starting on your own journey and saying, I'm going to take control of this?
Well, you can go over to some like it's pretty clear. You don't even have to go to many mainstream doctors to understand that they have no idea where to even start, right? So,
Hmm.
that you see they don't know anything about diet, nutrition. I was always a firm believer from the very beginning that this is something that has to do with like things that are environmental, something that could change, something that it's not this is not necessarily just like oh, you need a pharmaceutical to fix this, right?
Right.
So my idea was this is more nutritional, more foundational rather than this is you just need a certain drug and then you'll be fine.
I remember
And
just
yeah,
to add to that, I remember when I was doing research back at university, and that's so long ago, we had to use microfiche. For those who don't know what that was, we had to literally, to find books, we'd have to put this little file under a light and you could figure out the book and the Dewey Decimal System and wander through the library. And on one occasion, I remember referencing the New England Journal of Medicine. And I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. This sounds like really important. And before I got to the article, I thought, well, let's just read what the front of it said. And this one blew my mind at the time because it said, we don't cure diseases, we treat the symptoms of. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, so it's when, after unpacking it for quite some time, I recognize that our entire model for a long period of time has been based on that model, but the public perception is that you go to the doctor and you have a set of conditions and they give you some long Latin name that you have no idea what it means, usually with an itis or something, which means an inflammatory response to this that's disrupting whatever this,
right.
and it's, I think, designed to obscure and create authority. And we think that that's healthcare, but it's not. It's really treating the symptoms, what's either in the health community called a lifestyle issue, or in the biology community, a genetic condition, or a overt toxicity, or a disrupted function. You can go down the list of those. And but that was clear to me is like, oh, I can't actually go upstream and fix the problem with modern medicine, the way it's set up and the way it's being taught and the way it's being, distributed and compartmentalized and monetized, that whole system of healthcare. And that's when I became super passionate about like diving into this. Was it just kind of like once you talk to a few doctors, you were like, okay, they don't know what they're talking about. I got to, you just made that jump really quickly.
Yeah, yeah, it was very quick. It was very quick. Like, why do I have brain fog or why can't I sleep? Why it was just like you saw the tools in their arsenal was like, okay, we could send you to a psychiatrist, we can,
Right.
like
Oh, yeah, that's another one, right? That like if they don't know what it is, you're something wrong with your mind, or they
right.
discount the symptoms you're feeling. That's the one that really drives
Right.
me bananas.
It
Is
was
that
just
like,
clear they didn't know what was going on. Like it was like, okay, look, oh, you got some inflammation in your foot. Okay, maybe we'll send you to a rheumatologist. Maybe we'll send you to a psychiatrist. We don't really know what's going on. Sorry about that. And then you go to one of these guys, and you're just like, okay, I see what's going on here. Um,
so
but
you took
it was
authority.
just clear, yeah.
So you took, here's the point I think for our listeners that's really key. You clearly took responsibility for your health right away in a very short period of time. And I think the hope and what we want to communicate to people is that, hey, look, a doctor, a nutritionist, and whoever you're going to is someone who's got some expertise teaching something, but they're not necessarily like they're essentially employed by you, like you would employ a lawyer, or you would employ a financial team, or you would employ uh, you know a landscaping team to kind of get you to this is what I want my house to look like, or this is what I want my finances to look like. And you're saying, like, imagine, I'll give people a reference. Imagine, you're going to do landscaping at your house and you say, well, I want trees here and I want some flower beds here and I want a slope on the lawn here and this kind of grass. And they're like, well, here's a pill. And maybe that will warp your perception and you can see that, because we can't do that really. And I think it's a very crude assessment, but I think so many people are under the illusion that they have no autonomy in this. And so you quickly grab that. And I think that's an important point of this journey. So we'll get kind of back to your story. So how old were you when this
But
happened?
yeah, I mean, I started having health issues as an adolescent, but I grew up in a family where we grew up with the idea of, supplements, alternative medicine.
Right.
So that wasn't and skepticism towards doctors, right? Like
Right.
I grew up with that. Now, I also grew up with other things that I got rid of.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I totally
So
can relate.
it's not like I grew up with it and therefore I kept with it. I kept with the things that resonated with me, and I would say I'm more like I'm overall a skeptic, but the idea that, doctors are not going to fix me was already built in, and I didn't, I just you go to a couple doctors and you get some confirmation,
Right.
and that was that, right? But on the other hand, I would go to, some alternative doctors too, and it seemed too woo-woo for me sometimes. Or it's like they're doing muscle tests. I don't know, just different things that were like, I don't know if this is true. I don't know what's going on here. It seemed like, and everybody had their own kind of ideas about what's going on. Like if you go to a Ayurvedic person, they're gonna tell you, you got some pita, or you know,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. There's all these different paradigms in the health industry. There's the
right.
Chinese medicine model. There's the
The
Ayurvedic
Chinese is gonna
model.
be like, yeah,
Right.
your yin is too strong. You might need some more yang, whatever, like,
Yep.
and
Yep.
I just didn't get these. I thought these were interesting ideas, but I didn't really understand. Like, I didn't know if they really understood my health issues, right? I didn't
Yep.
get the idea that they were really understanding what's going on. I was, I was always more of a scientific guy, so it wasn't like so. It didn't resonate with me. A lot of the alternative medicine. I think now you have a whole new branch that would have resonated with me, like data driven alternative, right? So not mainstream, but data driven, which you didn't have 20 years ago. That wasn't
No.
the thing. It was like
Yeah.
you'd go to like traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic, some naturopathic person, or chiropractor is going to do some, they'll break your neck or something, they'll crack your neck, and maybe give you some supplements or whatever, but I'd say it wasn't very much developed, so I realized I had to go my own way, and
Right.
um, and I'm not saying that there's probably a lot of benefit to different parts of these systems, but I just didn't resonate with it, and so I was just like, okay, I'm not going there, I'm not going here. I got to just figure this out on my own. That was the conclusion.
Got it. So what did you start doing? What were the
I
things that
started
you
reading.
started?
I was
Got
reading
it.
like a lot of Wikipedia articles, a lot of PubMed, a lot of abstracts.
Got it. So you bypassed maybe book concepts and went right into scientifically
Yeah,
validated periodical stuff.
I never read books on well, I read I read a few books in the beginning and then I realized that they were problematic. But I would just read more like blogs, more PubMed, more Wikipedia. But like I remember one book I read was like the China study. And I'm like, okay, like when that first came out, I read it and then I was like, okay, let me try a vegan diet. And it just didn't work for me at all.
Mhm.
And and it's like you hear all these, arguments about whatever. Then you realize, there's a lot of data twisting and data mining going on here. So yeah,
One of the elements I notice I always think about nowadays is like how much research was done without actually profiling the genetic variability within the sample group. Almost none of it has been able to do that. And we do know that some people can do really well on a plant-based diet. Some people, it's the disaster form. Some people do really well in a carnivore diet. Like if a great example is Dr. Jordan Peterson and his daughter, who have a rare genetic condition. Everything screws them up. And so they only eat meat. That's it, nothing else. And that's all they can
yeah,
function on. And they function really well on that diet. It sucks in a lot of aspects. It's super simple, um, but it's produced extraordinary results. And I've met, 110-year-old raw foodists who did really well on that and didn't live in a holistic place. They lived in New York City. So you'd think a raw
right.
food guy out in a tent somewhere, and they're very massive variabilities here that don't always condense. And oftentimes books or courses or ideologies or strategies are generalized, but that's only going to take you to so far. Maybe as a directionally, in that direction could be towards better health or towards poorer health, depending on how how the cards flop out for you. But so I'm interested as you were reading these periodicals, how are you able to make these determinations like, hey, I'd like to try that?
Well, in the beginning, I was just trying everything, and
Right.
so I tried the vegan diet, and then I remember I got into Bulletproof in like 2011. Tried that like right when he first came out, pretty much.
Right. Yeah. Because he was
Um,
running a blog. Dave was running a blog back in
right,
those
right.
days.
And I was
Yeah.
like one of his first readers, and because I was reading all about this stuff, right? And so before he came out, I was reading about all this stuff, and then he came out, and I was like reading his blog plus a bunch of other stuff, of course. But the idea was, but then it was what I realized is you would read like 10 different blogs, and each person is saying that they're the healthiest person, and each person's doing different stuff. And then I said, okay, let me try what everybody's doing. So I would try what each person's doing. I'd be like, I'm not getting the same results as these guys. I'm getting very different results here. Something's very different about my body than their bodies. And I would just start understanding more that, wait a second, it's not one size fits all over here because what's clearly working for one person is not working for another person. And I've tried it out myself and it's not working for me either. You know, like, maybe this thing works for me, but it works for this person also, but it doesn't work for that person. And so what was clear is that I needed a individual like individualized treatment or an individualized protocol that wasn't just a generic, hey, this works for this other person. Because a lot of things that worked for Dave didn't work for me, right? Just
Yeah. Yeah.
coffee doesn't work for me. Uh, I don't notice the difference with it if it's coffee or mycotoxin-free coffee. They both don't work for me equally as much as far as I can tell, right? And so I'm not like susceptible to I'm not sensitive to mycotoxins in particular. Um, Not that, they're healthy and everybody should be breathing them in. I'm just saying like that's not my thing. Um, and what I realized, my thing is more close to Jordan and Michaela Peterson. So I did a carnivore diet before they ever came out, before anyone knew about them.
And
And
what was your results? What was your results when you switched over to that?
it was good. I had a very good result. So what that made me realize is that my issues, I mean, it was a long process to figure it out because you don't want to, before carnivore, you were just a crazy person if you didn't eat normal food. Like my mom would just be like, why what do you mean you can't eat like rice or something, right? Like, what does that mean? She just didn't understand. She's like, stop thinking about it.
Right,
So
right, right. Back to the you're crazy
right,
diagnosis,
right,
right?
right. Exactly. And I was like, no, I'm clear. Like, if I eat, some of these grains, oatmeal, rice, whatever, I'm gonna be floored, right? I can't function for like a couple days here. And so it's a similar issue to Jordan Peterson, Michaela Peterson, different, slightly different autoimmune issues. Mine was more centered on the hypothalamus. Jordan Peterson has more like uveitis. He has different autoimmune conditions. Um, Maybe some brain inflammation. Michaela Peterson had arthritis. So like clearly different issues, but similar concepts where I realized I was getting inflammation from food. And I developed a lectin avoidance diet in 2013 based on because I realized that it was probably from lectins in food. That was now I was thinking like nobody's ever gonna do this stuff because this is batshit crazy. Like who's gonna like you would speak to somebody on the street and they'd be like, who's ever gonna like not eat normal food? Like, wh why would I do that? Somehow the carnivore diet took off to my surprise, right?
Well, of course, you could say there's an argument that almost anyone on the street actually isn't eating normal food in its classic definition
Right.
of,
That's also true.
historical elements with the industrialization of food and of the highly processed elements of it. We've essentially cultivated over the last, say, 80 years a ginormous repertoire of what's defined as food people consume and get either building blocks or energy units out of it. I would say probably 80% of the average person's diet is completely alien to any species of humans 100 years ago, maybe even less.
Right. I agree with you, by the way. I'm just saying that the reaction from people was very
Sure.
strong. Like,
Yeah.
you mean you can't eat fruits, you can't eat, like you can't eat all these things, like any grains, beans, bread, whatever. They just couldn't understand it. Like it didn't compute for them. And
Yeah.
so but anyway, this is more or less what I did, and I would always try to expand my diet, and see if like, okay, if I expand it, if I take this supplement and then expand it, will it help? If I do, so I've been doing
Yeah.
experiments for the past 20 years, but what's been really a game changer for me has been the experiments plus, like I would say the guided experiments. So there's a few things, I'd say there was four key areas, right? One is learning about my body in general,
Yep.
which I gained a lot of information about how, human biology, how it works. I would say doing self experiments was tremendously beneficial. So, but like learning about the body, I learned about, okay, there's a Th1, there's a Th2, a Th17 immune system. And based on like, this is just one example, there's hundreds of examples, but it allows you to see that some people are Th1 dominant, some people are Th17 or Th2 dominant. And you're like, okay, it's clear that this person fits into this profile, Th2 dominant. They're more like allergies, pollen allergies. I'm more, uh, you know, um, food sensitivity, kind of like more just chronic inflammation, whatever. So I built like different paradigms of, okay, if you have these symptoms, you could fit into this box. If you have these symptoms, you fit in that box. And so that was one thing that was like very useful for me to like put, segment people and okay, Dave is, he's Th2 dominant, right? Like clearly I never had a weight problem. He was obese from the very beginning. Clearly our physiology is different, right?
Yep.
So I would say like I would categorize like I would research the biochemistry and start categorizing myself and other people in different ways, right? People I worked with, clients. That was very helpful. And then so that was one. Number two, the self experiments were super helpful. And then three was the personalized health, which was a real game changer. And the personalized health was mainly the genetics and then also lab testing. Now, I would say lab testing as a whole was probably equal to the genetics, but it's way more time consuming and costly and significant because a genetic test is a one-time thing. But basically, like lab testing as a whole and genetics were very instrumental in understanding what's going on and what to do. So along these, like I started with one and two, basically doing experiments, reading about the body. And in 2013, I started getting more, or 2000, even 2012 already, I started getting more into the genetics, more into the lab testing piece of it. And the lab, and these were things that just I've been growing with over time. You just learn more and more things over time. And the combination of all these things is what made a huge it was a game changer. Like so I reversed all the issues, all the health issues. I figured out exactly how my body works, why it was broken, what I respond well to, what I don't respond well to. Um, I'm able to manipulate the body in a whole bunch of different ways, typically with supplements. Because if you think about it, the diet and the lifestyle stuff, uh, the diet stuff was important. So in the beginning, diet stuff was the most important. I was exactly like Jordan Peterson and Michaela, right? And it's interesting. We actually had similar. I actually did a podcast with Michaela like 10 years ago, no, 8 years ago, and yeah, and it was actually 7 years. Well, yeah, some time ago, but we had similar genetic variants that I had suspected that had to do with food sensitivities. There's probably a lot more, but I remember thinking like, oh, we got the same exact variant, and it was related to the cannabinoid receptor because I think some of these effects are related to the cannabinoid receptor. There's actually now I understand it's actually related to many things. It's related to the tryptophan pathway. It's related to yeah, it's related to overall. It's related to oral tolerance. So if your body is not good at creating tolerance to extrinsic proteins, you start becoming allergic to everything. Either
It's a nice
how
summation. That's a really nice summation right there.
yeah, and what kind of allergy you get is dependent on your genetics. So sometimes you could get a peanut allergy and then you need an EpiPen, right? Other times you could get just a general sensitivity to lectins and you just get inflammation from eating things that are not meat or chicken or whatever, right?
Yeah, great insight,
Yeah.
great insight there. When did the identifying your genetics kind of happen for you? You did all these self experiments probably without genetic testing, and then you had genetic testing. Like, how did genetic
It
testing
was
inform your experiments?
It was a very slow process. It started in 2013, but it was
Hmm.
slow. Like first you start with like I learned about, 20 genes or whatever. You first start with MTHFR, right? And then you're like, okay, COMT, this one and that one. And then I realized that there's a lot more to genetics than just individual genetic variants. There's actually, you can combine genetic variants and try to get some even more profound result, right?
Yeah, yeah,
At Self Decode we use very sophisticated AI to combine millions of variants to come up with a even much more significant result, right? And these are validated as well. So there's a lot of ways you could use genetics, and I've been basically just surfing the wave of technology. So
hmm
the most basic primal way is just looking at individual variants, which you can sometimes pick up some. Okay, it seems like I've got some biochemical abnormality here or there, right? Like if you see MTHFR, a lot of people with very odd health issues have MTHF, I have two of these, the 677T variants, right? So it's like a lot of people with these weird health issues have these variants. There's something to do. You could understand, hey, this methylation, this folate biochemical pathway's got something to do with it, right? Um, and hey, you got this weird genetic variant in the cannabinoid receptor, so the cannabinoid receptor has something to do with it. And by the way, these both definitely have something to do with these issues, and I realize that now. But then you also continue to learn other things, and then these polygenic risk scores are also interesting. Then there's pharmacogenetics, which is also you learn some things from. Um, and then there's yeah, and then so then there's like different variants that might make you more or less likely to do well with something or not. So it's kind of like it's been like this long process of learning a bunch of different pieces. It's like a huge book of information, and you keep on just like you keep on picking up new pieces of information, learning new things, and making better decisions based on that as the technology progresses. And I've been riding that wave, and I've always been finding that it's been providing a lot of very interesting insights along the way.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip. Turn cultured foods into superfoods. Raw fermented foods like sauerkraut and low sugar, live yogurt can be good for you, but rarely have enough of the right probiotic strains for therapeutic benefit. So here's a way that you can turn them into superfoods. What I do is I get some raw sauerkraut or a healthy yogurt. Ideally, it's grass-fed or coconut-based, and you can empty 3 caps of P3OM into a container and mix it up thoroughly. Leave it at room temperature for a couple of hours before putting it back into the fridge. And what's going to happen is these probiotic levels will be multiplied. In fact, it doubles every 20 minutes. And then what you're going to get is you're going to have a food with strong proteolytic activity. To learn more about P3OM and why its patented strains make it the strongest probiotic available, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
So, what were some of the things that you discovered, say, early on that were needle movers, and then later on that were needles? Like, what were the first things where you're like, oh, wow, I've been struggling with this, and that just corrected it. And I'm like kind of blown away and then hyper motivated to take out the other elements. Because 60 chronic elements, that's a pretty big laundry list. And you probably had to do a lot of different things to knock all of those things out. But were there any big needle movers for you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. So I think the first big needle mover was the diet, right?
Yeah.
Once I fixed the diet, that was a big needle mover. I would say
Yeah.
mental health, understanding that was another big needle mover. So over the years, I understood what my neurotransmitters were like and how what makes me tick. And I would say so in the beginning, just the diet was the biggest piece of it. And
Yep.
not only the diet, but also how to create oral tolerance. I learned a few good hacks that made a huge difference. For example, it became clear to me that if I really upped my omega-3 dosage, my food tolerance went up.
Right.
If I took a resistant starch, a specific one, not the shitty potato starch, I mean, some people, if you're already sensitive, then you're going to be sensitive to the potato starch. That's the problem. If you're not,
Yeah.
then maybe it's fine. But the idea is that so I only sell one supplement actually. It's Joe's resistant starch, and that's because this was the resistant starch that really made a huge difference in my food sensitivities. So, I would say that was a huge needle mover, and what that does is resistant starch just turns into butyrate, and butyrate activates a certain receptor that creates oral tolerance in the gut.
That's
And
huge.
so, yes, that was huge, right? So there was butyrate, there was fish oil, there were, these were two very significant needle movers. Like I found that I could just increase the butyrate production with more resistant starch. I could counteract a lot of these food sensitivities. Now, sometimes when you only have limited tools, you overuse some of the tools. So I would take a lot of this resistant starch because that was the thing that helped me the most,
Right.
right? And then but the side effects are you get bloated, right? I was taking 120 grams of it a day,
Wow.
and yeah, and so you get some bloated, you get your farting, but I'm like, hey, look, this is saving me, right? I could eat different foods. Also, for me, if you take too much of it, it could cause sleep issues because it's very strong. It's like it's like it feels like ketones, right? And so it's for me, it was pretty strong. Like it's like it was wakeful promoting. So there was some like now I take 40 grams a day. Um, and even then I could reduce it. I recently reduced it to 30 because I have so many other tools in my arsenal. But the idea is that one of the other tools, most significant tools I found was niacin, nicotinic acid. And it turns out that both nicotinic acid and butyrate activate the same receptor. But they
Interesting.
do different things also. So there's a whole different pathway that's going on, which is this tryptophan niacin pathway. And I was deficient in both tryptophan and niacin. And what happens is that so if you're stressed, and most of the time, a lot of people get issues after they're stressed, like a lot of these autoimmune issues, especially. You suck up tryptophan because your body creates serotonin and kynurenine. So it basically takes this tryptophan and uses it for, first of all, you're using more serotonin, but it also creates more kynurenine and glutamate, and like it's excitotoxic. But it's the bottom line is you're utilizing more of this tryptophan. And also, if you're just anytime you stimulate your nervous system, even if you exercise, your body uses tryptophan. Then you get a deficiency of tryptophan, which is needed to create this oral tolerance. Vegan diets do that too because they're very low in tryptophan. So the perfect storm that I would see is somebody goes on a vegan diet. They they're on a vegan diet. They're stressed out. They're over exercising or whatever. All of a sudden, they come out with all these autoimmune issues, right? Usually what happens is they lose the tolerance to a bunch of different foods. It's because they become deficient in tryptophan. There's also probiotics that are involved in it. So there's different probiotic species, particularly L. reuteri, that utilize the tryptophan to create oral tolerance. There's certain bile acids, like TUDCA is one that is a bile acid that can potentially help create tolerance. And then so there's an array of things that help create tolerance: tryptophan, niacin, the butyrate or resistant starch, fish oil, and certain a lot of nutrients. So if you're deficient in a variety of nutrients, it could also create problems with tolerance. And then also collagen. So collagen is just important for basically sealing the gut, and collagen is going to depend on what is the rate limiting factor for collagen production. So there's a bunch of different rate limiting factors depending on what your rate limiting factor is. Sometimes it could be vitamin C, sometimes it could be glycine, sometimes it could be lysine, sometimes it could be proline. There's a lot of and sometimes it could be sulfur. There's a lot of different rate limiting factors for collagen production. Sometimes it could be iron if somebody's anemic. So there's no one answer of why somebody is not producing enough collagen, but the idea is that you need a lot of this collagen. You need to activate these. It's called HCA2 receptors. That's what niacin and butyrate activate, and you need to produce IPA, which is a byproduct of tryptophan that the microbiome does. So we kill our microbiome with whether it's Roundup or antibiotics or not eating the right foods or just not getting it from our parents, right? And so you could kill your probiotics from just taking antibiotics once, and from a variety of other factors, of course. So you kill your probiotics. You're not getting enough tryptophan. You're not getting enough niacin. Niacin is also in more in animal foods, but I can't get enough niacin in my diet, right? Like I need to supplement a lot of B vitamins as well. And it just creates a perfect storm where we don't have all the materials needed for to create oral tolerance to foods that are in our environment. And the more vegan your diet is, the more stress you're putting because the more plant materials that your body needs to create oral tolerance to. And so, there's a perfect storm, if you will, of these events, and I that's why most people have some kind of food sensitivity or food allergy. I've fixed 95% of my food sensitivities and food allergies through this protocol. And, so I see Jordan Peterson and Michaela Peterson, and I know they can be fixed, right? The problem is they're very risk intolerant
Yes.
because they don't do experiments like I did, right? They don't
Yeah.
look at the biochemistry, they don't look at their lab tests like I do. They just don't take that same approach. And so I think if you take their approach, you're going to get their results, which is like very, very slow. It took them forever to realize that you react to this thing. The reason I figured out early on is because I said I'm going to eat one food at a time and see what I react to, right? So that's how I figured it out before anybody else. And and then I also looked at the genetics to see what are these biochemical pathways, what's going on, right? Why am I susceptible? And that helped me figure out, hey, this is related to this is related to that, methylation, related to cannabinoids, related to, and actually the lab tests pointed me towards niacin. So I had high phosphorus, and the best way to decrease phosphorus. So what we have is in our system we have these optimal ranges, and the optimal range for phosphorus, you want to be lower in your phosphorus. And what happens is that there was a bunch of clinical trials basically showing if you just took nicotinic acid, it uses a phosphorus to create NAD plus, right? And I was like, okay, let me take niacin. And when I took niacin, the lights just turned on, right? I also did a different test measuring my mitochondrial function that showed that I need niacin as well. So there's like 5 different data points coming together. And so I use a very, number one, experiments. I use data. I'm willing to look at data, do the experiment on myself, do the experiment on myself even without data sometimes, but maybe just a good direction. And I've figured out, hundreds, thousands of these little, tidbits and things that are beneficial. Whereas, Jordan Peterson, he might be a great psychologist, but he's extremely risk averse in, hey, I know this works, I'm not trying anything else, right? Like he doesn't
Yeah.
want to tease it apart, which I think is an approach that is in some way it's safe, but I think it's also not the best approach. And same with Michaela Peterson. And I kind of understand Michaela more than Jordan. Michaela's thing is like, hey, like I'm gonna be knocked out for 2 weeks if I do this one thing. And I also got knocked out for a couple days, but I would also say, hey, if I get knocked out, there's an opportunity to do experiments on, like to see how I could get knocked in
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
with these supplements.
It's a much more dynamic approach, and of course, you've made it your career founding Self Decode. Can you maybe share with our listeners why you started Self Decode? What is Self Decode, and how does it impact the world? Because it's obviously you've got an incredible database. A lot of people use that company to help them in their journey. Can you kind of share how you got started?
Yeah, so I originally started a website in 2012 called Self Hacked. And the original idea was I'm going to hack myself, right? Cuz nobody else is going to do it for me. And you know, and I just started producing a lot of content, writing articles related to different areas of biochemistry, supplements, different conditions. And then what I realized is, we were releasing so much content, but what I realized is people don't know what's related to them and what's not. Like you'd have to read the whole thing, try to figure it out. It's like people are like, okay, I don't know like this is all interesting, but how do I apply this to myself? And I would tell people, well, this is only do this if you're like this, and only do that if you're like that. And I realized like we need personalized healthcare here, right? So that's where, and so once genetics started to come online and lab testing got more accessible and more information came out about lab tests, I just started getting more into these things and said, okay, this is great. We've got all this, the software was lagging for the genetics. So that's why I said, I'm going to get into this software. Like from one test, you could get the most information from just, like one test. It's just imagine all your DNA, one test, the amount of information there is tremendous, right? Now, there's that was it was more of a software problem, more of a how do we decode this stuff, right? But the idea is now the technology got a lot better that you could do so many things that you weren't able to do a few years ago.
How old were you when you decided to start self decode and go down that entrepreneurial road, taking your own journey, saying, you know what, I'm going to spread this to the world. I'm going to create a company that helps people identify these unique elements of their own diet so they can save doing the single food experiments, or they could do the radical diet integrations, or all those things that many of us did. I've done so many of that stuff because there wasn't any options. Now there is, and you can cut the learning curve significantly.
So I got into it. Self Decode, I started in 2016, early 2016.
Yep.
And I'm 38 now. So that was 9 years ago.
So what have you learned along that journey, both as an entrepreneur and as someone who optimizes people's biology? What are the two elements, or the multiple elements related to those two separate topics?
Oh, that's interesting. Biotech is a very difficult field to be in. That's one thing I
Right.
learned.
Yeah.
Um, One of the reasons it's very difficult, this field, is because, I'm always trying to be on the cutting edge and trying to do the most cutting edge thing. And so now we have AI and genetics, and, there's so many good things you could do with genetics. But then you have a lot of people just looking at single variants, like, hey, we're looking at these 10 variants, and the consumer doesn't know the difference between
Yeah.
what is what is this super sophisticated technology versus this dinosaur tech. They just don't know. They can't know. Even doctors don't know, right? And it's like an
Yeah.
uphill battle just trying to speak to a doctor. They Because a doctor doesn't know. I mean, most people don't know bioinformatics. It's just a esoteric field, and they don't
Well,
understand like.
it's like most people don't know plumbing,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Right.
Yeah,
So
I don't blame him. I'm like, I don't either know plumbing, so I get it. And that's why I'm always like skeptical now because of this industry. I'm like, well, microbiome, I don't know what's going on there. I'm not sure what test to get there because, I know in the genetics industry, two people are selling a genetic test. One is complete crap. One is, tremendously valuable, and most people tell the difference before they buy because it just seems like how are they supposed to know? How are you convincing them, right? So it's very difficult from that element, business wise, for the consumer side of things. That is one of the reasons we got into the business to business side of things, and the practitioner, because it's like, okay, it's easier now to convince practitioners and easier to convince businesses, um, that want to also get into this space. But I would say that's a difficulty. And also, you know, um, yeah, so it's biotech requires, normal companies just require like, okay, if you're doing a regular tech company, you need some developers and that's that, right? What else do you need? You need maybe some marketing, some developers. Here you require a whole different, like, you need all of that stuff plus an R&D team, data engineers, like things that you wouldn't ordinarily need in a regular startup. Bioinformaticians. So and then there's like regulatory, and then there's It's just a complex industry, I would say, and explaining it to the consumer um, is difficult. Now, it is tremendously valuable because the like also you have to. It's also difficult to break that value up because one test could really give you so much, right?
Right.
But people don't want a DNA test. They want to fix a specific issue.
Right. But I think a lot of people have to recognize nowadays, first off, most of the science that many of the doctors have developed didn't have the availability of genetic testing to begin with. So they never got
That's
schooled on
true.
this primary. It's an
Correct.
emerging field. There's a tremendous amount of data that's coming up, and there's variances of expertise. Like, how do you ask the question? What are the combinations that are involved? Like all of those elements, which we're learning. And of course, AI is helping out on that journey to kind of figure things out. Just to circle back, what have you learned maybe from your clients, other than the fact they just want the one thing? What are some other things that you learned that was, surprising or interesting from so many data points coming in? I think you've got several 100,000 people that have used your company. Is that not right?
Yeah, it's up to 200,000 people around.
It's a
So
lot
yeah,
of people. That's a big impact.
yeah, there's a lot of people that have used us. What have we learned? I mean, it's a very scattered field, right? So some people just want to come and learn what their MTHFR is, right? Some people want to learn a whole methylation pathway. Some people want to learn about their future risk of disease. Some people just want to learn about their nutrigenomics. Some people want to learn pharmacogenomics. Everybody's got like a different thing, and how they want to use genetics. So,
Yeah.
and that comes from how they're learning about it, right? If you listen to Gary Brecka, all you want to know is MTHFR. Like if you listen to some other guy, you might want to know something else. So it's like it's people are teaching about it and it's slowly seeping into the consciousness of people, and then they know it's valuable. So when you tell people about it, they know it's valuable. It's like, hey, look, you can predict your diseases in the future. You can see which supplements you should take or which nutrients or which drugs you should stay away from or what, like there's a lot of value to be unpacked, but there's a disconnect between the person of like, okay, how do I use this exactly? Um, and I've had a few clients where even somebody in the company actually, it said he had a high risk for sleep apnea, and he had no idea he had sleep apnea, but he did the test because he had the high genetic risk, and he had sleep apnea. Which once he got once he got that taken care of, it fixed all of his issues. So,
So how do
you
so
know,
how do people typically interface with self decode? What's the process for them if they're saying, "Wow, this sounds really cool, Joe. I'd like to use self decode." Who's self decode for, and how do they interface with the company?
so it's first the most basic thing is to take a test with a swab, and
Yep.
you get your results back in 2 weeks. Then you could either do one of two things. So what we realized is the biohackers want everything, right?
Right.
They want it all. They want to
Yeah, they're all
know,
trying to live to be 250 years old or
right?
whatever. So they need
Exactly.
everything. They need every arrow in the quiver, where someone who might be suffering from an inflammatory condition just is like, how do I fix my gout, or how do I fix my brain
Yeah,
fog?
right. So there's the people who, not even biohackers. Some people I wouldn't say are biohackers, but they want to learn as much as they can about their bodies, and they're willing to like look through information and read things. And so I think the self decode platform is, for those kinds of people for sure. Then there's people who are just trying to fix a specific issue. We started selling individual reports for that.
Right.
Like if somebody's
Right.
like, "Hey, I have one specific issue that I care about, like mood or sleep or whatever." We have a marketplace that we sell these individual reports that with the risks involved and also like it's a summary of a bunch of different topics within a category plus the recommendations there.
One of the statements you made, and I'm curious about it, was you have one of the lowest or slowest rates of aging. Um, of anybody you looked at. How are you determining that, and what do you think is contributing to that?
Well, there's no one way to determine it. I look at a bunch of different tests. So some
Yeah,
of these are these methylation tests and these rates of these you know different biological age tests. Uh, one is the true diagnostic, but I'm looking at other ones also, right?
yeah,
And I'm actually not a huge fan of these tests, to be honest, but I do look at a bunch of markers that indicate, my body is aging at a slower rate, right? So inflammation is lower, oxidative stress is lower. Like there's a lot of indications that I'm looking at. Um, and even just I look younger too, right? People think I'm younger. I have these video. I started doing a few videos on Instagram where I would just like ask people how old do I look, and they're typically guessing. There was this one girl. This one actually started going viral. There's this one girl that she was 28. She said I look 26. And I said, "Would you date a 26-year-old?" She said, "No, you're too young for me." Like, like I made it seem like I was 26, where I didn't ever.
that's funny.
I was like, "So you're not gonna date me because I'm too young for you?" She's like, "Yeah, no, no, I'm 28. I can't date you."
That's
I'm like, "Oh,
hilarious.
I'm actually 38." She's like, "Oh, okay." And then I'm like, "Would you? How old? What's the oldest guy you would date?" And then she's like,
Right.
38. I'm like, "Oh, are you saying 38 because I'm 38?" She's like, "Yeah."
That's yeah, I'm 38 divided into 26 or something. So you're going to get maybe people will start predicting, well, what's your age correlated to your age of aging? So you could start
Right.
making up the gap about when you could time the dating period or further. And that might be a better option for people if you actually thought about it. Because age is just, revolutions around the sun, not necessarily, it doesn't give you any, there's generalizations of that, but we see massive variance about how people age or how that might influence their ability to produce offspring. Um, I guess that maybe one of the questions before we wrap up, I guess, is where do you see the future? Like obviously you've made tremendous strides in the course of your lifetime in being able to overcome, which would have previously been either debilitating or maybe even fatal when you have those kind of conditions, over a long period of time. How do you see the future of healthcare, individual biological optimization, and what's maybe coming down the pipe since you're so deep inside the industry?
So I think that there's going to be definitely a continuation of these four things that have helped me in the past, right? So number one is I think you could see it, and I could clearly see it in each of these categories. One is I'm always finding that as long as I'm doing self experiments, I'm gaining knowledge that I can't get from books or ChatGPT or even self decode, right? Like it's just there's a
Yeah,
gap there, right? There's a
yeah,
gap between what somebody has studied and what you can learn on your own body, right? So I think there's a value for that for the next 20 years, right? I don't know when that's going to run out, but there's a continuing value. We're getting much better information about how the body is working all the time, and it's being much more easily organized and whatnot. So I think there's also value about understanding the body still. Genetics is getting way more advanced, and I'm seeing that the role of AI in that, and if a company's using the proper technology, the advancements are incredible. Just the value. I'll give you an example of something new that we're releasing. Is we're looking at rare variants now. So looking at the super rare variants is interesting because everybody's got like 3,000 rare variants. And
right.
these rare variants are making you tick in a certain way that you can't just figure out from something like MTHFR, which is a common variant. And it's also different than these polygenic risk scores where you're looking at millions of variants because one of these rare variants can make a very big difference. So there's a
Could
combination now
offset a
of
whole bunch of suboptimal ones or
yeah,
disrupts a whole bunch of good ones. And I think it's kind of like athletes. You know, I've had the good fortune of competing at the world championship level 3 times in various incarnations of my life. And, you know, I'm smart enough I can get to the championships, but there are just genetic rarities. And when you get into the
right.
world class zone, you're primarily dealing with people with genetic rarities to be the actual best in the world. And last weekend, I was hanging out with a former natural Mr. Olympia winner. I'd competed in that show, and we were having this was just this weekend, and wonderful person he is, and it's completely obvious just on observational level, like this person is a rare genetically elite person. Like his capacity to make muscle and retain muscle
Right.
is absolutely in the unbelievable zone, you know? And when you see that, it might be interesting how that could identify opportunities for people to maybe really excel in a given field. Maybe it's intellect, maybe it's art, whatever. Who
Yeah,
knows where
so
that's going to go?
it goes both ways. So it could either
Yes.
be you get these rare variants because just evolution. The whole process is you have a rare variant and then it either becomes more common through selection over time because of some environment like this person surviving, or you just get weeded out, right?
Yeah,
We're
exactly.
less getting weeded out now, but the idea is that you still have these rare variants. Some of them could be for the good, some of them could be, most of them are just for random issues. Like one could cause heart disease, one could cause Alzheimer's, one could cause some weird sensitivity to mold or whatever. Who knows, right? There's unlimited, but we're learning better what these rare variants are. We're getting much better at this polygenic risk scoring, which is looking at many variants. So it's like the whole genomic field is getting better and better. And I think that we're learning more and more. That's what I'm saying. I'm riding the wave. Like
Yeah.
2012, what did I know? MTHFR, right? Now it's just a completely different ballgame of what I know compared to MTHFR. Now, there's a lot of people still on the MTHFR bandwagon. Like that's the only thing they know because they're just getting into the field. But there's way, 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 way more you can know. So I'm still a huge proponent of genomics because that really helps you understand how does your body tick, right? And if you know
Yeah.
that, then you know what you can do to improve it. Same with lab testing. I think what we're seeing is more information on lab testing and more lab testing being done and cheaper lab testing. So the prices
Yeah.
are coming down. There's more things you could test for. Like there's just new tests that you can do that we didn't have 20 years ago. Um, they're more common. They're more tested, and there's just more information on it. Like we have way more information on lipoprotein A, for example, LP little a, than we did 20 years ago. So we're gaining tons of information on lab testing. Like, you know, now I'm tracking TMAO, right? Uh, that what didn't exist 15 years ago. So
Right.
we're learning new biomarkers to track. I'm tracking serum amino acids now pretty consistently, and we're learning more information on what these metabolites mean. So that goes into metabolomics as well, right? But it's basically just a certain kind of lab test, a blood test or whatever, that is measuring something in your body and in its current state. Even these methylation tests are a variation of that, right? They're trying to measure something in your body, and I think the combination of genetics and also measuring what's going on right now can lead you to a lot of very interesting information. Plus, we have a lot of good information about how different supplements can influence genetics and influence these lab tests. And so it gives you much better knowledge of what to actually do, which supplements to take. And I'm a huge proponent of supplements. I'm a supplement junkie, right? Because I think that they help me the most. I found that it's like you exercise 30 minutes, an hour a day, you got the the 80-20, the 90-10, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You're not eating processed foods. Okay, great. The rest of it is like, what else are you doing? Like changing your biochemistry with supplements. That has had the most profound effect. But then the question is, now we have so many supplements available, right? You could take thousands of supplements. Like, which
Yes.
supplement do I take?
Correct. Correct. So, yeah, I'm down that rabbit hole myself, and my business partner, Matt. Like, we have a pretty big cabinets of supplements which we take, and then similar to you, I run little experiments on something I heard about or something new or something new applicable. I'll run a test and we'll see what happens. And and it's interesting, even the variance between the two of us. We have completely different diet strategies, some of our supplements overlap, maybe 50% of them, and then the 50% are individual variants. So it's fascinating, just even in our own company with the founders that we have, when we compare notes, which has been very helpful because it has allowed me to just take everything with a grain of salt. Well, okay, I like that. That research looks great. That supplement looks like it's a high quality product. Well, we'll give it a shot, run an experiment, and then we'll see what happens. And sometimes it's positive and sometimes it's negative, and sometimes it's just like nothing. There was neither. There was no
Right.
response. Well, meanwhile, he might take that same supplement and go, wow, that was the greatest thing I ever, man. That was a big needle
I
mover
see
for
it all
me.
the time. I see it all
Yeah.
the time. Yeah.
And yeah, so last question. So longevity wise, what do we think? What do you think that we're capable of humans with technology now, and as technology develops in the future?
Whew, I think we need a breakthrough in order to really, live super long. I think the supplements and some pharmaceuticals, you know, I I I take I take 170 supplements. Well, and I would say 160 and then 10 are, let's say, pharmaceuticals. Um, I would say that that like, and I'm still like perfecting that. So I'm thinking,
Yeah.
okay, I could probably, oh wait, I'm always going to be perfecting that. That's never going to change. I think you could go a long way with perfect knowledge, right? With really good information, maybe 120. I don't think we're there yet with that perfect knowledge, but um, like I think you can probably get to 120 with really good knowledge as time goes on. I do think that to go beyond, we need to figure out how to change organs and, replace stuff.
Yeah.
It's just like you could take care of a car, but at some point that engine's gonna go.
Correct. Yeah,
Like
exactly. Yeah, and
you
there
can
may be
really treat it
and that
right,
may be
but
related to
yeah.
factors completely outside of the biology applications that we're using. And I think that
Well, it's
might
just
be where the
oxygen in
breakthroughs.
the atmosphere, right? Like that just degrades
Yeah.
things. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's
Who
just
know?
like
Yeah, we don't
it's
know. Yeah, we don't know
it
what that.
turns rusty at some point, right? And you just need to be able to change the piping and like piping can last a certain amount of time. It's just not, no matter how well you take
We
care of
do.
it, it's just not going to last forever, right? So it's just we got to figure out how to replace different organ systems, I feel like, which again, I mean, I don't think there's anything like, maybe the brain is the hardest one, but you know, you're I think they'll probably be able to grow new stuff in labs and slowly just be able to replace things at a time. Maybe the whole cardiovascular system, but maybe they can replace like one part of it, here, one part of it there, instead of the whole thing in one go. Um, but yeah, replacing different organs, kidneys, liver, just the heart, and then uh, I think the brain can last a long time, but I think replacing organs is going to be a maybe like, and I think they're onto it, right? Like I don't know, I
Yeah.
don't think it's like science fiction, right? They can grow some of these small organs in labs, and I think they just need to, you know, yeah, just need to perfect that, and then maybe also some CRISPR type stuff to like manipulate a gene here and there.
Yep.
um
Yep.
that's just like, you got this rare mutation, it's just broken. Maybe supplements can help, but it's not going to completely fix it. So I think the combination of these technologies and then AI is just gonna like help all these things. And I think AI is more gonna be in the beginning just better information. And it like everything can use AI, including genetics and all these things. So yeah, I'm pretty optimistic. It's hard to predict, but I'm pretty optimistic, given the pace of change that I see.
Excellent. So where can people find out more about your company, what you're doing, where you're writing, where maybe you're social media, all that sort of stuff? You can share that with our listeners, because it's obviously we've covered a wide element of territory here, and there's a lot more layers to the cake, and I would want to open that up for people to follow you.
Yeah, so the company is selfdecode.com. They could go there. We have also for practitioners, we're going to separate that into a different brand soon, but essentially it's also on the same site. We also have a B2B called Omics Edge. So we power, different organizations that want to introduce precision health. And then me personally, I'm Mr. Biohacker on Instagram. It's MR Biohacker. And I started doing some new shenanigans in just like interviewing random people. People find that entertaining.
Excellent. Joe, this has been informative. Thank you for taking the time, joining us from Tel Aviv and being on the West Coast. So thanks. It's probably getting relatively late up there. So I appreciate you taking the time for us today. And for all our listeners, we'll have all the links on the show notes. Please check it out. And again, more importantly, I think take notice of one of the things that Joe has been able to do, and that is to take control of his own health and run the experiments and get some data to support it. Because at the end of the day, everybody else in the world is not responsible to your health. You're the only person responsible to your health. And get the right people to inform you, run the experiments, and maybe you two will outdo Joe in age at a slower rate than him. Who knows? He's got a head start. But hey, the gauntlet's been dropped. So thanks so much for joining us. I'm Wade T. Lightheart from Bioptimizers. This is the Awesome Health Show. We'll see you on the next podcast.
The Bioptimizer mission is to help more of the world fix their digestion at a core level. The truth is, your digestion is only as good as your enzyme levels. Imagine trying to build a house with a tree. It's impossible. You need to chop the tree down into small pieces. Similarly, in order for your food to be used by your body, it must be broken down into a bioavailable form. And that's what enzymes do, converting protein into amino acids, fats into specific fatty acids, and carbohydrates into usable energy units. We start out with an abundance of enzymes, and that's why kids can digest just about anything really quickly. The thing is cooking food kills enzymes, as they cannot survive at temperatures above 118 degrees. So years of this ends up depleting our bodies and leads to weak digestion. Taking digestive enzymes like masszymes, which has an incredibly high level of protease for digesting protein, as well as other critical enzymes like lipase, amylase, and others, is a total game changer. Suddenly, you strengthen your digestion, eliminate gas and bloating, boost metabolism, and multiply your energy. Most importantly, you fix your digestion at a core level. To get started with masszymes and to save 10% on your first order, go to masszymes.com. That's MASSZYMES.com and use the code MASS10, MASS10.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.